There we go. Okay, that's better. Okay, hi everybody. How you doing? There we go. Look this way. Don't look into the mic. Still working on that. We're gonna have that problem all night long. So tonight is the long-anticipated fake news meeting. So most of you have been here before. A couple people that haven't been here before. How this normally works, there's a presentation part that's normally about, I try to keep it to 30, 40 minutes. Sometimes I ramble on, but I do try to keep it short to give everybody an introduction to the subject, and then we switch, and then it's your turn to talk and ask questions to discuss amongst yourselves, argue, and throw things at me. That was odd. Welcome to AEON3. So before we get started, an overview of AEON3. AEON3 is about the third eon of mankind. So the first eon was when we were under nature's thumb, and we were working on getting out of that. So we had a long period of time where we basically were just animals living under the thumb of nature. And if it rained really hard or something bad happened, that killed us. The second eon is what a lot of people refer to as the information age. I would call it the writing age. We began writing things down. And once we started writing things down, everything changed, because then we could warn ourselves of future potential dangers that we knew. Like a cave painting that says, food is that way, lions that way. Excellent for the later generations, right? We're still in that age. Our technology has advanced very dramatically, but we're still in that age where we're in the writing and information age. The third eon is where we become free from nature. Nature becomes something that is at our whim, not the other way around. So there's a lot of different people that put a different time frame on this. I think the time frame doesn't really matter. It's something that's on its way, and our technology is enabling that. So that's the basic concept of AEON3, the third eon of mankind. There you go. Our sponsors, I'd like to thank the Doc, HB, for giving us this lovely space and letting us talk in here and all meet here and everything. And there's pizza, which is really cool. So I'm excited about that, because somebody save me a piece, please. And also Blue Iron Network for doing a lot of the technology, and Hans from, I'm going to screw it up again, Pixel Mova, not EO, Pixel Mova, pixelmova.com. So yeah, Hans does all the audio-visual, he does the editing of the videos that are on YouTube, all the sound editing, everything, and he's just awesome. Thank you, Hans, for all your help and attention. So those are our sponsors. So fake news. So where does it come from? How does fake news happen? So the way that fake news started, now fake news has of course been around since the dawn of mankind, right? That's something we all lie, right? We all lie about things and use it to manipulate things to our favor. But one of the things that I'm talking about is this is a little different. This is where you use a medium to broadcast that news to other people to manipulate them into doing something that you want. That's kind of the difference to me from straight up lying. Although there is a lot of straight up lying that goes on in fake news. So one of the early ways that we got into this in the modern age was email chains. You guys remember this? After email was invented, email gave us a new medium to broadcast stuff to other people. Stuff they didn't ask for, stuff they didn't want. I could just push it to them, and they were just stuck with it. They really had no choice but to read it and move on. And you guys remember this in the 90s. You all got them. You forwarded some of them, didn't you? Things that look like this. Please forward right away. Forward this to everyone you know. If you don't forward this, 24 years of bad luck is going to fall on your head. It's going to be terrible. So this was pretty limited, though, in its distribution, because when you get one of these, at first you think, oh, God, I got to do it, otherwise I'm going to, get a bad disease or something. And then later you kind of warm up to, it's not really that big of a deal. I get that they're lying to me, right? You figure it out. So we went to kind of a little different way. So it might be that it was political in its motivations, right? You began to get things that were more political, people forwarding around to a like group, something that was pretty political, and everyone wanted to bend people to their ideas. And then there's stuff that was just an outright lie, right? Like this one. I've fallen, it's the typical Nigerian crown prince scenario where I'm going to go through and, I need somewhere to park my millions of dollars, and if you could help me out by using your bank account, that'd be great. And then you can keep 10% of my $20 million, right, just for your help, right? That's obviously a lie, right? We figured that out pretty fast. But in 2016, there was an explosion of fake news stories. It exploded in a way that we'd never seen before. And a lot of that is because of Facebook and social media channels. Suddenly there was a way that you could, through social media, reach millions of people. That's a hell of a distribution list on email. So see what I mean by limited scope and email chaining? But this technology enabled this, and this happened really in 2016. That's when it took off. There is a notable change in how we communicate, and it is a technical change that was enabled by the Facebook wall and a certain gathering of momentum that suddenly we just went over a cliff. There were so many eyeballs on Facebook and other social media chains that suddenly we could just all at once be fooled by these things. And it's new, so we didn't see it coming. Like, is that true? Was there porn on Barack Obama's computer? Who knows? Who knows? So, I gotta change my page here, because I can't read things up close. That's part of the problem. So then this news that would come out through these channels, which we saw also in 2016 go into 2017, would be picked up by the news stations. And they would start broadcasting this as part of their regular political broadcasts, right? Really picking positions. And we've really seen a polarization of the media over the last few years, where they pick a side. And they pick the stories that they want to talk about and broadcast those stories or promote the stories that affect their particular political beliefs. And you've all seen this over the last few years. It's really become quite the moment in American media. So, since we're on the subject of Barack Obama, I would like to introduce our first guest tonight, who's joining us by phone. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could give a warm round of applause for President Barack Obama, who's on the phone. You're supposed to clap because he's on the phone.
Hello, Bob. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. President. It's quite an honor to speak with you from the outside air.
Thank you, Bob, for the invite. I love all the work you're doing with the AEON3.
Thank you very much. So you've been the target of several fake news stories, from the birther movement to the allegations of porn on your computer that we just saw, to stories that the Barcelona terrorist was your cousin, was your actual cousin. Did you know it would be like this when you became president?
It was a total shock. No one should have to put up with the kind of attacks made against me.
I'm really sorry you had to endure those accusations. That sounds pretty horrible.
It goes with the job.
Well, it must be a relief to be out of the fake news limelight for a little bit.
It is wonderful. I can golf, water ski, skydive, do my knitting, and watch Trump without worrying about what will be on the news.
Wait a minute. Did you just say that you do knitting?
I find it calming.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for joining us here on AEON3, and I wish you the best of luck with your knitting.
You are welcome, Bob. I will make you a nice sweater for Christmas.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, President Barack Obama. Let's give him a big hand. Woo-hoo. So fake news can come in a lot of forms, and it's the openness of our society that is actually promoting this. And that's one of the challenges. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives us the right to do this. And one of the things that's really challenging to think about is it also makes it okay. Like, is this wrong? Is a really difficult question. Because making up a fake news story and putting it out on the internet might drive your political ideals. And therefore, is it breaking the law? If it's not defaming someone, it gets really complicated because you have the right to free speech. And we give all kinds of crazy people that right? And we protect it by law. So this gets into a really gray area of the Constitution versus modern technology. This First Amendment was obviously passed quite a long time ago, right? And now we're into the modern age. So suddenly, if you read that verbatim, is that really what we mean? And that's a challenge because it's changing. And we don't know yet. We don't know how to deal with this legally because it's a completely different and new idea. So the really big challenge is how do you protect a society and keep a society whole and working and functioning properly that believes in openness and free speech and the right to say anything you want, no matter how crazy it is, right? You have that right as an American citizen versus the subversive nature of fake news, right? Because when you broadcast this to millions of people, it takes on a different meaning because you can get a lot of people to believe a lie very quickly. Whereas in the past, you just couldn't do that, right? You'd have to drive around and talk to people and shake hands, and they would see you in the face, and it was very difficult to perpetrate a larger lie like this. But today, it's super simple. And that might be a challenge that we may have to go back and relook at something as fundamental as the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So to help us with this question of how do we keep ourselves safe, we tried to get George W. Bush, but I'm afraid he was busy. He wasn't available. So we needed to find a Republican, a president, who liked to talk in very short sentences. So without further ado, hello, Mr. President.
Hello from the White House.
It's a pleasure to meet you over the phone.
Happy to be here. I watch all your videos.
Thank you. It seems your recent trip to Asia went pretty well.
Yeah, I killed it. I always do.
So fake news seems to be a real problem for this current administration. It also
I
seems
take credit for that. No one was talking about fake news before me.
That's true. You did create the idea. How do you think fake news will ultimately affect your presidency?
My presidency will be remembered for all time as one of the greatest, and that is not fake news.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. So I just got to ask you, are you going to run again, even though your approval ratings are rather low?
I really love journalistic. Sex has always been something I am interested in.
So thank you for the compliment on our last show. That was a little unintelligible. I think I got it. I wish you luck on your re-election campaign.
It is in the bag. I am simply great. People love me. Good luck with AEON3.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, President Trump.
Fake news, fake news.
Yeah. If you want to clap, you can. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. The point of that, and we shall give Charlie a big hand. Come on out, Charlie, for being my president of the moment. Thanks, Charlie. So the point of that is that we're reaching a technological bend in the road. And if you guys have seen some of the software that's on the internet right now, there's one called Lyrebird, Lyrebird, and there's other video manipulation techniques now that can be used that can make anybody say anything on video, and it is indistinguishable from the original person doing it, right? You know that we're doing this in films, right? We're using animation and all types of technologies to make it where we can render a human being who isn't there, right? That's kind of the future of acting, and everyone knows it. Because as an actor, I don't want to put on makeup, and I don't need to put on makeup in about 10, 15 years, right? I will just stand in front of the camera. The camera will film me talking, and then I can be whatever age the camera the technology decides to make me, right? I can move around and be whatever I want. That has serious repercussions for fake news. This is just the first wave of this, which is why it's good that we kind of got it early from Facebook. There's also a huge opportunity to manipulate us this way. So one of the things that we've discovered, which most of you know about now, is that the Russian government has been buying ads on Facebook and Google and others on all sides of the political spectrum, including the far right and the far left. See how I did that? It's because everything's mirrored on Facebook. So that worked out great. It caused divisions. It really explored the divisions between the American public, right? We're a divided country. We're the only country that really has all these different subgroups and different political opinions and are enforced by the Constitution to be able to talk about them anytime we want. That's a heck of a chink in our political armor when you think about it. And it's kind of brilliant for them to use that technology to break us up a little bit and make us a little less of an adversary for them. So it's interesting as we start to move forward, what would you use this technology for if you were in a position of power? That's the thought process that's going on in the halls of power today. How do we use this technology to achieve our goals? And that is the thing that we should all be worried about, because that's not free speech. right? That's political manipulation of societies. That's normally been done through force or control of the media, right? One of the things I've talked about for a long time is the microphone. I'm a big believer in this thing that I write about called the microphone. And whoever has the microphone has the power momentarily. One of the stories I tell in the book 21 is about the gal that was the secretary, because that was back in the day when they were secretaries, of Geffen, the music producer. And they received a package from Jackson Browne, who was an up-and-coming musician, and Geffen just threw it right in the trash. Didn't like it, didn't like the music, didn't like the look of him, threw it in the trash. The gal came through that night, his secretary, and was emptying the trash, and she saw his package, basically, which I would assume would be like a cassette or a reel-to-reel or something back in the day. And she took it out of the trash, looked at the bio, played it, loved his music, and went back and asked Mr. Geffen to give him another chance. And for that one little second, she was holding the microphone, not Geffen. She was the one in charge. The microphone is a way that you get information filtered to you, and who's ever holding that has immense power. So one of the things I have very much observed about the Trump presidency, he is a master of the microphone, and he holds that and wields it like a sword constantly. Sometimes I don't know where he's going with it, and neither does he, but he uses the media in a way to keep and hold our attention, which is brilliant. He understands the power of the microphone. And we've seen other political leaders kind of doing that same thing. We've seen North Korea wielding the power of the microphone, threatening other things, but not really doing anything. It's kind of like the Cold War, but kind of not. It's more like the end of the information age, where we're arguing in public about who should we listen to. It's an interesting dynamic at an interesting time in history. And fake news, when you can actually lie and say anything you want and make it instantly believable with fake video, fake voice, fake recordings, anything. And some of these are difficult, even with forensic analysis, to discover that they actually are fake. So another fake news story I love is the tombstone story. Some of you have heard me talk about this before. So there was an issue a few years ago in cemeteries where someone was knocking over tombstones, Jewish tombstones. And it became like a huge news story that there was a big anti-Semitic movement, and this was white supremacists doing this, and it was all a big terrible thing. And how disrespectful to desecrate these people's graves. You guys remember that story? It was maybe 2 years ago. It's a pretty big story. Here's the interesting part about it. It was all a lie. The people at the cemetery that managed the graves, there was a windstorm coming, and they purposely gently laid the tombstones down to prevent them from being blown over and broken. And the news reporter that wrote that story knew it and wrote the story anyway, because it got higher ratings. It was a more interesting story if it was about anti-Semitism and white supremacy. It was something that people would click into, as opposed to, is it right for, management people at a graveyard to lay down the tombstones? That's an interesting little beat there. So suddenly we've got the media purposefully backing a story, which was then picked up by everybody, right? Everybody started talking about it. That they know from the very beginning isn't true, because it drives money. And that's a little bit different than politics, right? Money is something that kind of takes on its own thing and goes all by itself. Politics, I have to sell you on my idea, and even if I'm using alternative facts to sell you on that idea, eventually you'll figure that out, right? And you'll make up your own opinions. But through the news media, if I out and out lie to you to drive up my ratings, what's the repercussion? Nothing. Nothing. That's stunning. Unless I cause you harm and you can sue me through the news media for libel. But that's hard. And in this case, who was harmed? They're dead. The caretaker was, well, were they? Yeah, so the statement was that the caretaker was harmed because he was misrepresented. And that's true. And there was a story I read later about the caretaker saying, what the heck? Fake news, right? And, this has been around for a long time. And I know Trump just recently claimed ownership and for creating the fake news moniker. And I do kind of a little bit have to give him credit for that, because this wasn't something we were really focused on until his presidency. And now I'm focused on it. Now we hear it all the time because it started a war between Trump's fake news tweets and the media's fake news spin, depending on the channel you were listening to, right? It was very different on One America News than it was on Fox, than it was on CNN. Totally different. You could flip between the three networks on a single story and get three completely different perspectives. How can that be? How can that be? And it's because we're a little divided as a society. And I think, I've talked about this before, especially with you, that the uncovering of our divisions is probably the greatest thing that we can get right now because it gets them up to the surface. A lot of things that are going on in America that we're not comfortable with as Americans, and we've kind of hidden it for a long time. And suddenly these things are all out in the open, right? And we're forced to face ourselves in the mirror. And I think that's a good thing. And I think good things will come out of that. But lying, overtly lying, should carry a penalty, right? So the challenge is, how do we solve this without violating the First Amendment? So my daughter Heather, who's hopefully watching, she came up with an idea a few years ago, which I thought was really interesting. She came up with an idea of some type of meter or rating scale that rates the difference between truth and belief. Get the difference? So is this true? It's a 20%. How many people believe it? 80%. Or reverse. Another colleague of mine, Andrew, came up with an idea of a truth versus sentiment engine. And I think, Brett, you were part of that conversation as well, where again, same idea. How much do people believe versus how true is it by people that fact check, right? And Heather's idea took it a bit further, that there should be a new rating system for news versus opinion programs. And if you're a news program, you're held accountable through fines and through actually losing your news license if you lie, if you purposefully lie. But through a opinion program, now it comes with a warning label that says this is opinion, right? And none of this has been fact-checked or is fact-checked. So believe it if you want to. I've thought about that for a long time, and I don't know if it would change anything. Because a lot of times when we're watching these news shows, we know they're lying to us, right? We know they're making stuff up. But we choose to listen to the diatribe we listen to because we associate with that group, right? So that gets challenging because we're kind of supporting that infrastructure of separation. And I think one of the challenges that we have is we just are in a separatist society right now, right? And this isn't the United States. This is happening everywhere, which means it's information technology based, right? This isn't a US problem. They're having the same problem literally in every nation across the globe. And it's because we're crossing over a technological bridge that's going to drive a change in us intellectually and how we think about ourselves and how we think about us working together. And that's just one of the steps, one of the links in the chain on moving us closer to the third eon, right? We have to get past this. We have to get past the ability to misunderstand the truth and have a kind of global truth engine before we can begin to work together in a more closely knit technological way. Does that make sense? Okay, so I would like to open up to the floor for your guys' questions, if anybody has any. I believe the microphone is there. So if you have any questions, Hans will give you the microphone.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Okay. So I have like two sort of questions slash like thoughts.
What's your name?
Oh, I'm Jeff. I'm new here.
Nice to meet you, Jeff.
Hi, nice to meet you. Hi. Very, very nice to meet you guys. Well, so the first thing is like, if reality is so distorted, I guess like the conventional thinking is like, in this day and age, you can learn anything on YouTube. Like how to fix your computer. How to do some coding. But maybe like the contrarian reality is like, certain aspects of reality, like you said, people like divided in ways like things are not psychologically comfortable to talk about. Maybe the reality is that those aspects are more distorted than ever. So do you think there's like a massive edge to be gained by understanding reality that face to face, whereas people who are on the internet, like certain aspects of reality is just now systematically like so distorted that it's like it's like a bubble, right? It's like
Yeah.
there's no way for them to fact check it. Do you think that would be a case?
Absolutely. So long ago, when I was much younger than I am now, I went to a show in the computer industry, and the speaker there was Walter Cronkite. And I got to talk to him later, which was amazing. And I don't know if you even know who Walter Cronkite is, so I apologize if I'm using a name of someone you don't know. He was a very famous news anchor back in the day. I'm just going to say in the day. Probably one of the most famous news anchors of all time. So the Kennedy assassination and the Vietnam War. Yeah. So Cronkite, at the beginning of the internet, so this is maybe 98, 99 time frame, he was beginning to form an opinion that the problem with the internet in the future is anonymity. Because you can do things from an anonymous standpoint, he knew way back then where this would lead. It would lead to there's no repercussion for lying. And as a journalist, he knew that was a bad thing for journalists. He specifically spoke about that way back. And it's interesting when you think about somebody whose life is reporting the news, that they would have already made that connection on a future problem so long ago. And you're exactly right. We're at a bubble right now where the problem that people in the business knew was going to eventually occur has now occurred. And now the question is, what do we do about it, right? How do we fix it? How do we put the genie back in the bottle? And that's the difficult part, because you can't tell people to stop talking. You can't tell people not to lie. They have a right in America to do that. And it's challenged. It's going to be a big challenge. And I think we're going to come up with, like I said, a different kind of rating system that will create safe channels for the truth that you can trust. And right now, I can't name one, which is a little bit sad. There is no safe channel for the truth. Maybe politifact.org or one of the factcheck.orgs. But they're not, or Snopes, yeah, but they're not broadcasting. They're just fact-checking. So it's tough. But yeah, Snopes is a great example. If you want to know if something's true or not, just punch it in the internet and look at the different sources. But that takes time and effort, and you have to do it, and it takes time for the truth to come out sometimes, because the lies are very pervasive, right? They spread very quickly. This whole thing in the Vegas shooting, that there were multiple shooters, and that there was all these conspiracy theories, and that the police purposefully didn't respond, that the police chief in Vegas had to actually stop a press conference, stop the investigation, and form a whole new unit just to deal with the fake news. And many police organizations are now creating separate divisions within the police department designed to handle fake news spin and conspiracies. That's a weird statement about where we are as a society and where we're going. Globally, this is, again, not a U.S. problem. This is everywhere. And again, that means that it's not something that's endemic in our structure politically. It's not endemic in our structure socially. Americans, give yourself a break. This is not an American problem. This is something we've reached a technological bridge, and we have to move on. Can you hand the microphone to her?
I think that's actually a good thing, though. We're evolving, and we're not naive anymore. People won't just take things at face value. So the police tell us something, we used to just take it and consume it and process it, and that was the end. Now you need something separate, a separate organization within the police department that is just taking all the
Stories.
gossip and filtering it to the truth. That becomes part of their communication to the public. It's a healthy progression, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's important that the police have the ability to represent the truth, right? They have a moment here where they don't know, right? They could back a story or think something's not true that is true. And they have to come up with a new way to go that extra mile to make sure that they're not accidentally lying to us. It's really easy to take a story and run with it. There was a story that happened just a little while ago in Idaho. Twin Falls, thank you, Idaho. And it was there were 3 little kids, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, and like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. And they were in a closet doing some type of sexual activity. And I think the 2 older ones were boys and the younger one was a girl. And it was very inappropriate. But apparently the story got manipulated into There was a lot of Islamic people that moved in, and people in Idaho tried to stop them from moving there, and they failed and lost the ballot to stop that. So there was this big immigration of Islamic people that moved there, of refugees. The story got twisted that it was the two older boys were Islamic, and they were abusing this little white girl, and that the police department knew about it and didn't do anything about it. And the police department didn't respond because they didn't know how to respond. That's not the police department's job, right? The police department's job is to investigate into what happened here, and these are all underage minors. This is a very complicated case, and the police tend to shut up in those cases, right? And that's the wrong maneuver. That's the danger. Because while you wait, and while they waited, this in fact blew up into a national story, and millions of retweets of tweets and articles on Facebook and everywhere. This became a huge thing. And it was 3 kids acting inappropriately in a closet. And there was no connection to Islam. There was nothing there. But it turned into a national news story, and people were very angry. The police chief's wife was getting phone calls from people saying, how would you like it to be, we'll send some Islamic people over there to rape you and cut out your tongue and break all your teeth out. She was getting horrible death threats because now she was an Islamic supporter of people that are raping and murdering white children. See how that rolled? And that happened in days because of this, right? Because it can happen so fast now. It can go from a small little lie that gets compounded to a massive lie that can suddenly cause people to commit violent acts almost overnight. And that's going to increase in speed, right? We're going to get better at making that happen faster if we don't find a way to counter this. And I think that's why police departments now are coming up to the bar and saying, we have to take, instead of spending time investigating crimes, and we have very limited resources, right? We now have to spend some of those resources on making sure that we're communicating properly to the public so the public knows the truth. Otherwise, things can run away very quickly, and they're now getting that picture in their head that they have to control that a little bit. So I do think it's good. There's a lot of things going on I think are great. I mean, the Black Lives Matter thing I think is one of the greatest things on the planet. Not necessarily because I like their technique or style, but because there were very bad things going on, right? And it's now in your face every day. And you see it on the news, and you see the things that are going on, and now you have to question that. And it's caused a lot of other things to bubble up, like Blue Lives Matter. How many police officers are shot in the line of duty? A lot. I didn't really realize that it was that bad for them, and suddenly now I see that too. So it started one way, and now it's having a longer tail effect. So I think all these things are ultimately good, but the path through it can be very, very difficult. The guy that went up in the top of the parking structure and started shooting at police officers because he was mad because they weren't winning the Black Lives Matter thing, and he wanted to fight back. That's a violent act that happened because of this propagation of media. And we're going to see a lot more of that. I think one of the reasons we're seeing a large increase in mass shootings is the speed of this information banging around, that people really don't have enough time to process it, and then they act out based on what they feel. And when we act out, it's a mess. But when you get enough reinforcement for a negative idea, it's easy to let that happen. Make sense? Can you pass that?
You mentioned that President Trump is an expert at getting attention, but do you think he's tweeting and other things to get people to not pay attention to the news anymore?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. That's a really good point. Yeah, it's a definite two-way street there. You can use these tools to Carrie, can you pass over the mic for Brett? Oh, sorry. You can use these tools to smoke and mirror, which I think what you were doing. I'm trying to translate your gesture. But yeah, you can use these tools to smoke and mirror, and I think there's a lot of that going on. But Trump is a master of manipulating the media, right? That's if I had to pick his greatest skill, now that I know him a little better, than, we all knew him 3 years ago. We all knew him 3 years ago, right? He was the guy from the television show, and he was kind of a comic guy, and he was a multi-billionaire. And now we know him a little better. And I got a lot of questions. How much of that is true, right? How much of that is manipulation of the media? Because the way he's gone about this, I find interesting. It's like the first thing China did when they wanted to invade Tibet was remove all media. And today, there's no media in Tibet. You can't get a photograph out of Tibet. What's going on there? We don't know. No one knows. Well, is it bad? Maybe it's not bad. Well, but I'm saying, I'm hoping it's not bad, but really we don't know is the important thing. So when you look at what people that know how to manipulate the strings of the media are doing, they can use those for all kinds of purposes, right? They can use it to win a political election. They can use it to hide the truth. They can use it to purport a truth that has economic benefits for them somewhere else, and on and on and on. It's a almost unlimited scope of power. And that's my point. In this current technological evolution we've got to, we're at that point where things have changed. And we were going to get him, right? We were going to get somebody like him. It was just a matter of time. And again, I think this is a good thing. Because he's the way he is and so bombastic, you see him coming, right? You know what he's all about, and he's pretty obvious. And I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's trying to do the right thing. I think he's just the way he is. He's like the rest of us. He's just one other guy. But think about if he was a much more nefarious person and knew how to use the media like this. That's a person you won't see coming, right? That's a bigger danger. And the world is filled with characters in history that got into positions of power by convincing people of something, typically a lie, right? And sometimes we identified them, but most times we don't. We actually believe that everyone's telling us the truth all the time. I hope none of you believe that that was actually Barack Obama on the phone. First of all, I don't have a phone. That some of us, that we want to believe the truth, that we believe. I'm very open to people, especially if it's something that I want to hear. If it reinforces my belief structure, then yeah, I think so. You have to use the mic, otherwise the people on Facebook are so sad. See, I'm sticking up for you guys.
Yeah, I would say automatically, like, fundamental property of human nature is that we seek the confirmation bias of our own beliefs.
Yeah.
Everywhere we see. So, like, if I have an idea in my head, I'm gonna find it.
Yeah.
In the world around me.
I'm gonna find a guy that agrees with
like,
me.
That's a human nature kind of thing, not a person to person.
Yeah. We're very trusting of anyone that's speaking the same language as we are.
Yeah, like I want to see that other people believe with me, and then I see it. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta go on, even if it's remote.
And this is, I think, why we've seen such a huge growth recently in the white supremacist movement. That's been there all along. It was pretty repressed in the American psyche, right? But suddenly, it got in the news, and it got media, and it got airtime and play. And suddenly, it exploded so fast. It's like everywhere all of a sudden. And where did they come from? They've always been here. They've just been quiet, right? And suddenly they don't need to be quiet anymore because they found that affinity group that suddenly emboldens them. But by and large, the majority of us don't agree with that. They're still a minority. Did you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to like distinguish it slightly. Like fundamentally, like I'm going to find things in the world around me that agree with my preconceived ideals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm gonna find them, whether they're right or wrong. Like, oh yeah, there it is, there it is, there it is. And it's my perception of reality. You know,
Yeah.
So like, it's like I'm gonna make my world show up around me.
Yeah, I'm going to mold the world to my feeling. And with the way we select what we see, I'm pointing at this as the mythical cloud, right? The way we select what we get off the internet is purpose-driven to do exactly what you say, reinforce our own beliefs. Most of us don't read the internet to research other people's beliefs because that wouldn't be fun, right? It's much more fun to self-reinforce and make ourselves the center of our own
We're
universe.
gonna do that no matter what, whether we think we're doing it or not.
Right, exactly. It's human nature. And it's not a bad thing.
Conscious bias.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing we do. But like I said, when you compound that with this technological bridge we've crossed, you're going to get this reaction. And that's why I say it's happening everywhere. It's not a U.S. problem. I can't say that enough because a lot of Americans think this is our problem, right? Because we have this, multicultural society, multinational society, multi-ideological society, multi-religious society, that we have a bigger problem than everyone else. No, It's the same everywhere in the world right now. You're seeing it throughout all of Europe, right? It's terrible. And it is resulting in deep racial bias. And the challenge is, deep racial bias doesn't work. We know that. We've seen it before. We've seen where it leads. And I'm very happy to observe that now I'm seeing the opposite happen. I'm seeing that kind of being put back down, right? The reasonable voices are kind of coming back around, like you were saying, and we're floating those things up to the surface and then debating them in the open court of public opinion. And we want an open society. We want a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-race society in the United States. It's what gives us strength, right? So it's interesting. It's a very interesting time. One of the stories I heard today was on NPR about the movie Coco, which, for those of you who don't know, is about a young boy who wants to follow in his father's footsteps to be a great musician or singer, and they're Mexican. And then it starts with him visiting his dead ancestors in the afterlife, and then they kind of guide him. And one of the things that came up in that interview was that this film today is potentially subversive and anti-American because it promotes Mexican culture within the United States. And I could not disagree with that more, right? That's amazingly inaccurate, wrong way to approach this. But it's because of our current president's talk and build a wall, and there's a lot of people living here illegally, and we need to change all these things, that this movie, because it promotes Mexican culture, has caused a little bit of a backlash from people that feel that there should be bigger barriers for immigration. And it wound up being a conversation on NPR about Mexican immigration and illegal immigration and blocking immigration and getting rid of illegal immigrants, as opposed to being about the film. And I thought that was bizarre, but also brilliant, because that's the subject of the day, right? That's what we're talking about right now. It's what's in all the news. Do Mexican immigrants destroy the economy of the United States? Obviously not. Obviously not. There's no evidence towards that. In fact, the total opposite, right? Immigration is what the United States is built on. So we have to figure out a way to manage these two different opinions, and that's talking about it and having these different news channels that debate it and argue. But the trick is not getting too aligned with what you believe. I think that's one of the great dangers of fake news, is because we do, like you're saying, Brett, tend to wander towards the thing that we feel strongly most affiliated with. We wind up just self-reinforcing ourselves and not exploring and not learning and not growing. And I think that's a great danger for us to do. But I think we'll figure that out. You know, I'm always accused of being the eternal optimist. But I do think we are figuring it out. I think that's what all this last 2 years has been about, is crossing that bridge. So, any other questions? Do you got to take off? Bye. Thanks for coming. Did you take the microphone with you? He really is taking the microphone with him.
Hello.
There we go. Look at that. Adapt, overcome.
I think so.
Just talk into that right there.
Okay. Ooh.
Good night, sir.
Now I can say anything anytime I want.
And you're louder than me, which is even better.
I was just wondering about the difference between the last election, whatever that was, 2016, and then the next election, with the social media, with the Russians that were buying ads on both sides, causing the comments to explode with hate and trolls just eating each other alive. So did we learn anything from that experience now that we have a little more light shed on it? And will we handle the next election more enlightened and just with an ability to be rational and not so emotional about the issues and pick candidates based on that? Or do you think we haven't learned anything and we're just going to continue to spool each other up into emotions that aren't really productive?
Well, the first answer is we did learn something. So I'm going to be an equal opportunity pick on everyone here, right? There's I saw the videos of a organization that infiltrated Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters, and I've seen on film her campaign manager laughing and joking with the person about them paying people to start disruptions at Trump rallies, either posing as a very right-wing pro-Trump guy or posing as a left-wing person and then getting in a fight with the... They had done both those strategies. That's exactly the same thing that the Russian government did. That campaign manager is now in a lot of trouble. That's a new thing. Who we need to be holding accountable here is the campaign managers. When they do these things that manipulate the voters purposefully, and it's all based on lies, they're manipulating the U.S. voting system. They're breaking our system, right? And it's kind of a fuzzy area because we don't have a lot of law around this. And it will take time for our laws to catch up, but they always do. And then those people are going to go to jail. And you're seeing it now with Donald Trump's campaign manager. On the other side, there's a lot of evidence that there was some skullduggery here with the Russian government and collusion and financing and money changed hands. When the U.S. Justice Department gets to the end of their probe, and it doesn't matter who you fire, you can keep firing them. They're cops. If you fire a cop, guess what happens? Here comes another cop, right? It's an endless line of police officers. And investigators do what they do. They just investigate till they get to the truth. That's their job. They do it very well. So the thing versus Comey versus Mueller versus... that's just one person. That doesn't matter. The FBI isn't one person. You guys know this, right? Mueller's not the one doing the investigation. There are thousands of FBI agents and other private consultants that are doing those investigations and producing the reports. And they'll get to the bottom of this. And when they do, someone's going to jail, right? This is going to be a mess. And you've already seen the first prosecutions. First time that I know of in recent memory, I think maybe ever, that a campaign manager is being held accountable for doing something illegal during a campaign. Maybe it's happened before in the far past that I don't know of, but I've never heard of it. That's a bridge cross. That's an important one. Because the candidates traditionally do what the campaign manager said, right? Great example, John McCain ran for president. His campaign manager said, you need a woman running mate, you need someone younger because everyone's afraid you're too old, you're going to die. So they stuck him up with a partner. And that didn't work out very well, did it? No. And he just did it because they told him to. And later when he realized what had been done, he was furious. But there was nothing he could do. He couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. And he lost the presidency of it, over it. That's a shame. That was a shame. But it was bad campaign manager. And campaign managers tell the person what to do, and they do it. Because the campaign managers are supposed to have this skill of getting them elected. And it's a challenge. So I think we did cross the bridge with this election, where for the first time we're seeing both sides, campaign managers broke the rules to a huge extent. And everyone's guilty here, and the government's going after them. And that, for the next presidential election, is an important thing. If I was the new campaign manager for whoever's the new person that's going to run against Trump, I got to think about this a little more, because I can't use some of the techniques of just straight out lying, right? I can't do some of these backwards manipulation things. The U.S. public's onto it. And if the other campaign found out about it, and then it went into the news media, right, I'd get slaughtered. My person would be dead. So I hope that that evens out. But I also think that, political people, when they're running for office, lying to us or spinning things in a way that helps them to get elected has been going on since the dawn of humanity. And I don't think that's going to change.
There's also some regulations, I think, that are going to be put in place on Facebook and other social media sites, right? Where they're not going to be able to just spew out any falderall. They'll have to actually be held accountable, no?
Sort of, yes.
That's what's going on right now. We're
Yes,
deciding
sort of.
what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
that'll be important for the next election.
Yeah. Yeah, just hold that in front of him so that, or use that one, Charlie. There you go.
There we go. I got it. So there's no law against lying. We've
Right.
established that. The problem is once you start, as you mentioned earlier, some sort of rating meter, you start moving towards violation of the First Amendment.
Right.
Okay, we're not talking about any new concept here. Let's get that straight. Yellow journalism has existed for
Forever.
decades.
Yeah.
And in fact, William Randolph Hearst made a ton of money doing such.
Yes, he did.
Then along comes a guy named Roger Ailes who actually got Nixon elected, and we know how well that went. And he created a news network, to your earlier point, of it's sensationalism because what is TV all about? It's about eyes on a screen, and that's how you make money. So fake news or not, people are going to gobble it up. The question I propose to you is, how do you see technology evolving to gut check any posting,
Anything, yeah.
whether it be fake or not?
It's tough, and it will. The only thing I can tell you is it will, because one of the things that's happening with technology just in general is the speed of reaction time is shortening, right? It used to take longer and longer. Like, you get an email and then it's approaching instantaneous, and we'll get there. And also, you have to throw in here this beautiful little thing that's coming at us like a freight train called artificial intelligence. So one of the things that is impossible for us to do is to keep up with the truth. If I had a dime for every time somebody asked me, how do I keep up with the truth? How do I find the truth? What news things do you read? Where do you go to get this? How do you understand this? How do you find these things out? I get asked that question literally several times almost every day. And that gets at the point of a human problem, right? We're not good at research. You know what's really good at research? Artificial intelligence engines. They can pour through millions of articles. They can read every news story everywhere. They can cross-link and cross-reference and do things using big data that no human could ever do. The filter of the truth is definitely a temporary problem. It's this moment in history where these tools allow us to broadcast fake information on a wide scale. But this will not stand. But it will stand for the next 10 to 20 to 30 years. Yeah. Because you're talking about something that's so endemic in the human psyche. You're talking about a salesman in the year 300 BC trying to sell you some wine that is from this and that, and it's not. You're talking about the very basic way we communicate with each other. And our societies are all built on that. That is not going to change overnight, no matter how much technology we have or apply to it. But over time, it will change. And there's a reason. We can't go to the third eon of humanity if we can still lie to each other. It is not technically possible. So you've heard me talk about the links in the chain, right? That's something I talk about all the time. These are one of the links that has to be forged. We have to get past this moment of what we've always done. Because as animals, we lie to each other. We manipulate the environment to our own self-benefit. Of course we do. We have to. But as we move past biology and move past being animals, that won't work anymore. That basic human survival strategy will fail us. Does that make sense? You guys can see that it just won't work out there. Because this kind of creature, with the kind of power that it has, if it can lie and not get caught, it's a disaster.
So do you think that's because we will get smarter, or because the fake news or the lie will become more apparent?
I think it's a third thing. I think it's that we will partner with artificial intelligence, and it will become part of us, and it will become part of our lives, and it will catch us. It will correct us, and it will keep us on the straight and narrow. And just imagine that, a society where you can't lie. How would you live? It's almost unimaginable today because it's so normal for us. And think about it, what I just said, how wrong that is, right? But it's worked for us for literally millions or hundreds of thousands of years. And that's not going to go quickly into the good night, right? We're not going to just put that in a box and say we're done with that. We're going to go in steps. And this is the first step. The next step is the reaction to this step, right? The next link in the chain. And it'll keep going, right? And we'll go back and forth and we'll talk amongst ourselves and we'll bitch and moan and say, oh God, wouldn't it be great if this person didn't lie to us? But the next guy's going to lie to you. And this is not going to be solved by the next presidential election. No. They're going to lie to us. But you got to just do the best you can to get to the truth. And I think people that paint our current president as like some evil, terrible person, I don't think that at all. I think he's just a manipulator, and I think he's doing the best he can.
He's a master manipulator. He
Yeah.
came up through the media. He understands how to leverage the
Yeah,
media.
but I don't have anything really negative to say about him other than there's a lot of stuff that comes out of his mouth that makes this eyebrow go up a little bit. You know, I'm like, huh? that was odd. That can't possibly be true. And then I read and, and look it up myself. But most of us don't do that. Most of us are busy living our lives, going to our job, feeding our children, doing the things we have to do. And we don't really, care that much. So we just roll on and things happen. And next thing you know, the EPA is gone. Wait, what? So we have to be a little more checked in right now as citizens of the United States than I think we did over the last 50 years. I mean, really, since World War II, things have been pretty simple. Americans checked in during Vietnam. They checked in a little during Korea, right? In the 60s, we had a little moment where citizens checked in. And then it went away. And no one was checked in. And then we kind of checked in during the second Gulf War. The first Gulf War we didn't check in with at all. Yeah, do your thing. Second Gulf War, we kind of checked in a little. Were there weapons of mass destruction? Was that fake news? I don't know. It might have been. Maybe they believed it. I don't know. Maybe it was true. We still don't know. But we checked in a little bit on that, and then we checked out completely. And then 9/11 happened. And then we checked back in, right? And now suddenly there's all kinds of things happening. Mass murder, shootings. All these things are suddenly like happening all the time. And it's confusing to us. But during this time, we're going to have to check in a little more for the next 20 years or so.
It's not that these things weren't happening.
Yeah.
It's just that we weren't checking in.
We didn't care.
No, we didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to go to Vietnam? Go to Vietnam. You want to go to Korea? Go to Korea. You want to go to the moon? Go to the moon. Did Americans really debate or discuss us going to the moon? And what that would cost? And is it a good idea? And what's the benefit? And blah, blah, blah. No, hell no. There was a speech that was given. It was a really good speech, and we checked out. We were like, yep, cool. Do your thing. Please. Oh, yeah, hit that. There you go. It lights up when it's on. There you go.
Back in the 70s, mid-70s and early 80s, I was working with a couple of sociopaths. And I took the classic mold, which hadn't really been defined at that point because nobody was paying any attention to sociopathic
Behavior,
and evil. And to this day, there is still a deficit here.
Oh, yeah.
But about 10 years ago, all of a sudden the field opened up. And now we have books that are popular bestsellers, The Science of Evil by the guy that wrote the goats. What about the goats? Remember him?
Mm-hmm. I don't, but I trust him.
No. Okay. But I remember going to Cal State Long Beach and trying to find books, because I assume there would be dozens of them, that talked about evil, what it is and how to deal with evil people. And there was nothing.
Nothing.
There was the Freudian analysis, which was worse than nothing.
Yeah, it's almost backwards.
Yes, it is. But now we actually have the scientific backing to do something.
Mm-hmm.
My suggestion is that probably you're going to see it coming with the kids first, teenagers that is, etc. But although we can't do direct telepathy yet, we're coming real close.
Well, and that's kind of my point about the future, is that when I made that statement that when we move past biology, the way we are today won't work. Makes sense? Because you're right. If we have any kind of brain-to-brain interface, we have to be well past this time by the time we develop that technology. Well past this problem.
Why do you say that?
Because if I can lie and I connect to your brain, you would know my emotional thoughts. You would know that I'm lying. So it would serve no purpose. It becomes a non-functional thing in the future when we cross the lying occurs because of the separation between us, because we're not linked, right? So I can lie to you because you really don't know what's going on in my noggin.
But the point is, if you had a system that was approaching the smartness and complexity of the human brain itself, then we have systems now that will tell you whether or not somebody has seen the same thing before.
Right.
So we know we can get to that point. But if we can tell that somebody is faking it and that there are characteristic neurological signs that will point to that, then there could be like contests among people to try to open up.
Sure, but just think through a little deeper connection where all of my mind is exposed to you guys, right? Every aspect. Imagine this of all of you, and it's a frightening thing, right? Because we live as isolated creatures. Take away that isolation. One of the things that I haven't got, I don't talk much about AEON3, ironically, but in this future world, there is no separation between us of any kind. And that is different. That's very different. Imagine your mind and everything you think opened up and exposed for every other human being to explore, every aspect of it. And all of our taboos and differences are gone. Gone. That is the future. That's a hard thing to grasp today from where we are today because it's so different than the human condition. But the creatures that will live in the future are not going to be like us, right? They're going to be vastly different. Technology is driving us towards that. And that's why we're having these problems, because we're also being pushed closer and closer together mentally through technology today. News travels so fast through those mobile devices and those things that you're holding. And I easily read 100 news stories every day. How do I do that? Because they're on my phone, and every half an hour or so I click the news thing and I read the top 3 headlines. When you do that like 30 times a day, you're reading a lot of news. Now, I don't really in-depth read them all. I pick and choose the ones that are interesting. But it's a constant feed of data that, no human in history ever had that power. No one. No emperor of Rome. No, head of any government. No religious leader. No one has ever had that kind of power except us. And it's a huge challenge for us, right? Think about the evolution that's happening here for us and the things that we can do with that power. And of course, we use it for the dumbest of things, like manipulating political elections and money and the dumbest of things. And, cat pictures. Is that what you said? Oh, Kim Kardashian. I would have gone with cat pictures, but but yeah, that's because of course we're humans, right? That's what humans do. We just, we be human. The trick is, as we move to AEON3, is not to lose our humanity. That's actually the reason I started this group, and then I write about this and I think about this all the time. I want to try to preserve the human part, what makes us great, and yet I'll help in any way I can to move us to that new future, and then think about, what does that mean? And how does that work? Because it's complicated. And some of it means you have to give up your animal self. Your individualism has to go away. But you guys already know this. You feel your individualism being eroded constantly today. Right? We're all supposed to be the same color. We're all supposed to speak the same language. We're all supposed to do this. That's kind of the message that's coming out. And I disagree with that wholesale. It's not the right message. But there's problems in that, right? How do we live together in multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ideological societies? The United States is the shining tower on the hill, to quote Ronald Reagan, right? We are the beacon for this stuff. And it looks a little dodgy right now, right? We don't look like the shining beacon, but we are. Don't misunderstand this. We're the first nation that's really publicly struggling with this. And yes, like many times in our past, we look a little stupid. But that's because we're exposing ourselves to ourselves. And that is always going to make you look foolish, right? You don't have this under control. We don't have this under control. We don't know what we're doing. We're just banging around trying to figure out the right answer. But that's the right way to get to the right answer. There really is no other way that I know of to get to the right answer other than bang around like this and have talks like this and have public forums where we talk about it and open it up and have no limitations on what we say. But I think it's good. I think this is all very, very healthy, what's going on. And I do think it's going to get a little worse. The part I don't like is when people act out, right? When people read something and it hits, like Brett was saying, it hits that nerve with them and they really feel it, and then they think that gives them license to do something horrible. And we're seeing that not just in the United States, right? We're seeing that everywhere, more and more and more, where people get connected to the box, they feel like this is okay, and then they do something terrible. live on TV. Yeah.
Like ISIS. I mean,
Yeah.
Alan,
ISIS is a great example.
being a skeptical atheist here for a moment, how in God's name could normal, well-adjusted, wealthy, for a lot of them, wealthy in comparison with the third world, are going to fight anything, right? How could this possibly happen?
I get this question all the time. How could, and many of these people are very intelligent, right?
How do intelligent people get driven to do horrible acts? And it's easy. Self-reinforcing manipulation of a narrow ideology, right? They're being reinforced and reinforced by everything around them because they're the ones choosing the narrative. They're the ones choosing what videos they watch. They're the ones choosing to join these groups. They're the ones choosing. They're getting too linear in their choices because you can on that box. You can choose to be the most isolated, narrow, linear person you can possibly be and never think a thought outside of that until you literally do something horrible. And it's self-reinforcing. It's easy. When you click on a thing on YouTube, what does it do? It shows you 12 other things that are linked to that. That's the way the internet works. And we love that. Hopefully you're clicking on cat videos. With me, right? You're not clicking on subversive things. And the government's getting better at using the clickbait, right? And clicking through and watching what we're clicking on. They have no chance. No chance. There's only 350 million of us. There's like 7 billion people out there that are doing this. Right? You have no chance when they can indulge in an orgy of linear thinking. They're going to go all the way to the end. Some percentage of them. And that's why that's happening. Is that something that is going to last? No. No. What we need is some type of better tool to help a partner. We need a partner here to help us manage ourselves better. And that's artificial intelligence. Gosh, you've been indulging a lot in a linear way of thinking right now. Can I introduce some other thoughts to you? Make you a more well-rounded person? Nope, I just want to go linearly. 911. Right? We can tell when people are going down a path. Whenever we go backwards and look at somebody who's done something terrible, they've loaded up on information. Linear information for months, typically. We find out later. Oops. Except the guy in Vegas. That guy's still a total mystery. No one knows what he was doing. But maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we won't. And maybe it's just we don't have the tools yet. But this fake news thing can really drive that because it can make up stories that drive that linear thinking and reinforce it with absolute lies. Absolute lies. And to me, that's way more dangerous. And that's something that we need the law to catch up. We need our systems to catch up. And we need better fact checking. We need to really try to fight against this, to your point. It's something in the next election everyone's going to be watching for, right? And if you get caught crossing this bridge, wow, are you going to get pummeled in the media. And the media is getting pummeled, right? We've seen some of our top news organizations in serious hot water and are publicly apologizing constantly for things they've said that weren't true. We've seen major news leaders, right? News, what do you call them? Figureheads. Anchors, thank you. Lose their jobs over untruths that they've said in a moment of hubris, right? Oh, I'm so cool, I did this. Oh, no you didn't. Done. Right? And same thing you're seeing with the sex stuff, with people, especially men, losing their jobs suddenly for something they did 20 years ago. Charlie Rose just lost his job today after a lifetime in journalism for something he did years ago. Done. We're pretty black and white on this stuff, right? Once the truth, the lie is exposed, people jump right to the, I'm done with you. In most cases. Donald Trump seems to have a get-out-of-jail-free card on this that I can't explain, but that's okay. You know, people back him. But it's an interesting moment. So does that help you guys with fake news? Everybody feeling pretty good about this? Good? Yeah? No? Okay. Anybody else have any more questions? So we're getting near the 8 o'clock hour. Can you pass the mic back? Always trying to keep us on schedule, I am.
Okay, so my sister really honest, and I didn't get invited back. That's cool. But okay, so like I've been doing YouTube for a while, and then at first I gave like really honest like self-help videos, and also like programming stuff, like basically things that are very truthful, right? And what I found out is that those contents don't thinking about like making videos about like Bigfoot or like alien abduction, not because it's true, but because those things
To get your higher ratings.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's like a demand pull. It's not like if I just pump out the truth that people are consuming. It's more like I think like a lot of things we see around us are essentially just emerging properties of like human nature. And I think like most people, as you said, they go back to work, or tired, perhaps miserable. They want something that's going to give them a release that's perhaps going to reinforce their beliefs. And people want cat videos, right? People want comedy. People want like to hear about alien abduction, not to look at the harsh reality of, oh, I'm stuck in this like dead end job. Like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, those things are psychologically difficult. One thing I believe to be true about humans is like they move in the direction of psychological comfort, and things that are painful psychologically are systematically inefficient and misunderstood. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like I think it's stupid to make cat videos, but it's not irrational. Because
Totally
like,
agree.
you just get a bigger check from YouTube.
Yeah, and I couldn't have said that. That was amazing. That was perfect the way you said that. And it's an absolute truth that we
want to be lied to. I can't say that any other way. I want to be told that I'm beautiful and that all my beliefs are right and that I'm the most amazing person on the planet. And if I can find something that tells me that on YouTube, I'm going to watch that, right? Right, I am. It's inevitable. And I think it's super healthy. Because, see, we're human. That's the thing that is difficult. We're still animals. And animals need to flock together in communities of like purpose. And to find those communities, you don't want to have to search very hard. You want them to come to you. Everybody wants everything to come to you. It's very hard to reach out and go out to something else. And it's inevitable. And I think you're falling into the trap that all media has fallen into, is it's no longer important to make something relevant or rational because no one will consume it. It has to be something titillating, salubrious, topical, humorous, and if you can get all those things in one package, then you've got a really good daily show. Oops, did that just come out? The Daily Show. So there are, and it's true. They go viral, exactly. And you see every media master on the planet reaching for that thing, and no one is reaching for the truth. They're reaching for the audience, which is fine. They're in the media. Perhaps there are other channels for the truth, right? And I don't anticipate that this video will get a lot of views on YouTube, right? Because who cares about fake news? It's something I've already read about. But maybe the people that watch it will then help to solve the problem, right? This is more about communicating to people that want to be communicated to. If you weren't interested in the third eon of mankind, and you weren't interested in how technology is changing Homo sapiens, and you weren't interested in what this means for the future, you wouldn't be here, right? You wouldn't be watching the stuff on Facebook. You wouldn't be showing up. And people do. So I always have great hope for the future because people do show up and do want to talk, and there always is people that are interested in these things. But I think that the bulk of us, the majority of us, we don't have time. We're spending time, like you said, living our lives, washing our car, taking a shower, going to the bathroom, eating food, going on a date, just trying to figure out iTunes. There's a million things to do, and I don't have time to deal with anything that isn't entertaining when I want to be entertained. And thinking is hard. I can't say that enough. Sitting down, and I know it's hard for you guys, sitting here and thinking about all this stuff. It's an exercise, and it's hard, and I do it every week. It's hard. But to me, it's necessary. It's just part of the way I feel. But you're not gonna get great YouTube clicks with the truth. It's sad, but it's true. Sure.
Fake news is bad. It's a very scary thing. But to me, what's scarier are those ads, and particularly political these days, but the ads that tell you the truth, but only a very small fraction of the truth.
Yeah, the non-lie.
And those scare me. Because people are being
truth.
So manipulated by that that that's frightening. That's going to drive people to those actions that you were talking about earlier.
Yep. Yeah, it's so easy to take things out of context today, and then it's not a lie. And again, our current system does nothing to filter that because there's no way to filter it because it's free speech. Right. If I chop things up, it is the way it is. Sir.
There are people fighting on our side. two of them are Sasha, what's his last name? Something Borak.
I was going to go with Bear Cohen, which is Borat, yeah.
Baron Cohen, sorry. And his cousin, Simon Baron Cohen, who is considered to be possibly the top neurological expert in the world.
I did not know that.
Now, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a guy who was a World Federation wrestler champion who played the bad guy consistently. He took on the nom de plume of Gorgeous George.
I remember
And
Gorgeous
he
George.
would do a over-the-top, fag, pardon my language, impression, deliberately building up the audience hate, response, or throwing chairs and doing the whole bit, right? So here's Sasha and Simon Baron Cohen. They're in communication with each other, and the last scene of Bruno takes place in, guess what? A fighting ring.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's cool.
And so, what Gorgeous George was trying to do, which the Baron Cohen cousins have picked up the flag for, is the idea of bringing the truth out there.
Right.
Of having, just like the wrestler fans, having the movie viewers experience a catharsis in which they are so outraged, and then they suddenly, at some point, they start laughing.
Right, at themselves, yeah.
Yeah. So we do have allies. And some
Yeah.
of them are fairly powerful and effective.
Well, absolutely. I mean, none of us want to be lied to, even though we want to be lied to, right? I mean, think about how a weird dichotomy that is. And again, you got to just keep in mind how long it took us to build up all this, right? And why we are the way we are. There's a reason why it took us this long to get here, to think about all these things and become the creature we are. And we're not going to change that overnight, no matter what technology we introduce. But we are changing, and that's a beautiful thing, watching the change. And probably the thing I want to leave you guys with, which is this, and you hear it from me all the time if you come to these meetings, is this message of hope. We're moving past this. We're moving through. This is not the beginning of the end. It's the end of the beginning, right? We're just going to another phase, and we have to forge these links and learn these lessons and move through as best we can. And the best way to do that is to communicate and to talk and to help each other through it and learn from our mistakes. And I think in the last couple of years, to your point, in the last political election, we've learned a lot about this particular mistake. And we're going to see things change very rapidly now to make sure that we don't make that mistake again. So I think it's great. I want to thank you guys on Facebook for coming. I'm going to continue the conversation offline here, but I'm going to go ahead and shut down the Facebook broadcast. Thanks very much for coming, everybody.